If there are bushfire warnings that are issued for people to leave an area, what we often find is they hear the warning and then they come back home. So that could be to get the dogs, to get the horses out. We've had incidents of people going into fires with horse floats to try and get the horses out, with children in the horse float with them, in the car to go into the fire to get the horse out. So people going into danger to try and get their animals out.
The stress and anxiety experienced during extreme events changes how people consider risks and priorities, and how they respond in the face of danger. This can sometimes lead to remarkable, even heroic actions. However, at other times, it can mean that logic is replaced with emotion, placing individuals, their dependents, and emergency responders at increased risk.
I think some of the complexities around animal emergency management for the emergency services are that emergency services are looking after human life. That's the primary reason behind what they're doing, is to protect human life. But people often won't leave without their animals. We know from the statistics in Australia that around 62% of households have pets, and the majority of people who have pets consider them parts of the family, members of the family. So, we wouldn't ask people to leave their homes without their children. And to people who have pets, it's not that dissimilar an idea to ask them to leave the home without the pets. People are often not prepared for themselves anyway, but even those who have prepared perhaps haven't considered their pets, or haven't considered the extent to which considering their pets is going to impact on their behaviour and the times they need to evacuate and the things they might need to take with them.
With backing from the Bushfire and Natural Hazard CRC, Associate Professor Mel Taylor and her research team at Macquarie University set about collating the existing research into animal management before and during emergencies. The team concluded that there were significant gaps in the knowledge, particularly from an Australian perspective, so they decided to create a knowledge base that could be used by the authorities and communities to help guide communications and engagement around animal management.
So we were looking at, I guess the extent to which this was an issue, the sorts of behaviours that people might undertake, the ways in which they could be influenced, and also what we could do to improve the outcomes for people in these situations in terms of the resources we could provide, what is best practice in this area already that we know of, and how can we share that better.
Mel's work led to a number of opportunities to test their own recommendations with communities in high-risk areas, such as the Blue Mountains in New South Wales. A key finding from opportunities like this is that animals provide an ideal avenue to engage people around emergency preparedness.
So it just gives us a bit of an in. If you start talking to an animal owner about their animals, I'm as bad as everybody else. I can talk for hours about my animals, and it's a great way to engage with people. But if you can then have that conversation and bring that around to, whether it's a flood preparedness, whether it's bushfire preparedness, and start to bring that into the equation, you can start to think about how they can prepare for the whole household, which of course includes the animals as well.
The research also helped to identify who would be best placed to communicate with animal owners about preparedness and safety.
If we asked people where they would go for information, we found they were saying the local vet or indeed their emergency services. So those were the two places that people were thinking they would go to for information. But actually the organisations tasked with communicating about this are primary industries and agricultural departments typically. So the one thing we can do and we can help with is getting that information to emergency services, to have that information available, to highlight this with emergency services as well, that information is available is really useful. We've had open days in the Hawkesbury area here where we've tried to attract large animal owners in particular because Hawkesbury is very flood prone and there are a lot of horses on the floodplain. And a lot of the modelling that's done is about human evacuation. but we know that humans are going to want to take the animals with them. So we really need to get those horse owners to be engaged in risk, to think about what they're going to do for their situation, where they're going to go, what their triggers are going to be to leave, how long it's going to take, so that they can calculate back, I guess, when they need to start taking some action.
With the Animals in Disasters knowledge base providing information on best practice approaches, clarifying roles and responsibilities, and identifying more effective ways to communicate with animal owners, animal management is now becoming more central to emergency communication and engagement activities across Australia.
Communicating and involving communities is such a big part of disaster mitigation in general. So I think more community-led, more community engagement in this area is really helpful, getting communities to help themselves. So we've coined this idea of animal-ready communities. So in the Blue Mountains we've had the Blue Arc animal-ready community. It's about enabling and empowering communities to work together, to connect as much as anything else, and consider what they want to do with their animals. So there are lots of things going on at the community level, I think, in this area which are really positive. And also I think just generally more coordination between the various stakeholders within different states, but also across states as well. So there's more, I guess, harmonisation and integration in this area is really useful too.